Okay, I've got Elizabeth Lewis with me, and her company is Brand Style and Bloom by Elizabeth Danielle, and it's so interesting. The concept is given someone's personal brand, how they can be styled so that I guess their brand could be enhanced and their style fits their brand and so on. Elizabeth? Is there anything I can add to that description?
Yeah, I mean, I think you hit the nail on the head. First, I help people figure out what their personal brand is. And by that, I mean, what are their three unique words that fit who they are authentic to them, and also help them to get to their goals. And then I help them to figure out what's already in their wardrobe that communicates those three words. And then I go shopping for them as the last step to make sure that their wardrobe fully maximizes those three words and can tell that story.
So I never really think of so when I first heard the phrase personal brand, and I guess I'm thinking like 7 years ago,
Mhm.
I thought this was like a horrible phrase. So it's because like if you look at like the reality of Coca-Cola versus the brand of Coca-Cola,
Mhm.
there's a spread. There's a difference. Like Coca-Cola, when you think of the brand, you think of this lifestyle, like young people, it's sunny, everyone's skating around. I'd like to buy the whole world of Coke, that sort of thing. But the reality is, it's like this sugary drink that's allegedly not so good for you. I'll say allegedly because I don't know what I'm allowed to say about that. But and then with personal brand, it's even worse. Like am, you know, a person is a person. They're not trying to be something different from that. Like brand, I always think of as something that's different from the reality. And so I feel like personal brand means someone's going to be lying to me to make me think something about them. Am I wrong about how I'm thinking about personal branding?
Well, there are a few things that are really critical as to why it's really important to have a personal brand. The first reason is that you want to be able to take control, right? So I think Jeff Bezos once said, your brand is what other people say about you when you're not in the room. So if you don't know what your brand is and what you stand for, other people can take control of that or have misconceptions about you and what you're bringing to the table and who you are.
So give me of a good example of personal branding in a real life case and a bad
Mhm.
example.
Yeah, so a good example is when you know what your brand is. So with my clients, I help them identify that. So one of my clients' brands, his brand was refined.
Okay, well, can you name a
Yeah,
name? Like what's I wanna it's just before we get into all
yeah.
that, what's a specific example of a person, like a specific person who has a personal brand and it's working for everything they're doing, it's working for them?
Yeah. Well, I hope I can name someone who is deceased, but I would say Steve Jobs
Okay.
because, I think of his style, and yes, he always wore the black shirt and the blue jeans. And for
The black
him,
turtleneck.
the black turtleneck,
Mhm.
exactly. And so for him, that was time savings, right? Because he could always just focus on the great products that he was bringing out. So it communicated his brand in that way of the importance of his products. And then the second way it was communicated was through minimalism. I mean, he's literally wearing a black turtleneck and blue jeans. And so when you think of that, his brand is also being all about being very
Right, so
minimalistic.
there's this famous photo of him when he's younger in, the Dakota, an apartment building in New York City where there's no furniture and he's just sitting on the floor cross-legged in his black turtleneck and blue jeans, and it's kind of a well-known photo of him.
Right,
So what
exactly.
would you say Steve Jobs' 3 words were?
So I would say minimal, visionary, and then impactful.
Hmm. Okay, and then I feel like with him, part of his personal brand was, also he had a good sense of aesthetics, like he had a good sense of design.
Mhm.
So, I don't know if that fits in exactly, maybe that's part of the vision.
I think it's part of all of those
Mm,
things. I mean, a great design can be literally all of those three words.
mm.
So, of course, it was a revolutionary, impactful design, but was also minimalistic.
So what's an example where someone wasn't properly managing their personal brand and that had, unfortunate effects?
Yeah. So I would say that's really anyone whose brand you don't know. So those are the ones that are kind of silent and quiet and aren't really communicating anything.
Like, like let's say you're an author, how do you usually an author is usually behind the scenes a little
Hmm.
bit, like
Hmm.
they're you don't necessarily know who they are, they're not necessarily public figures. How do they build a personal brand?
Well, I think it's important for them to build a story. So you look at someone like J.K. Rowling, and for her, Harry Potter had such an amazing impact that was worldwide. But when you hear about her origin story of how she was kind of like rags to riches and then just reached these revolutionary new heights with Harry Potter, that kind of feeds into the appeal of the magic that her books bring.
Yeah, and I guess also, some thriller writers have kind of
Mhm.
an espionage background or whatever that they built up that part of their story. So like what are some clients right now that you're helping? You don't have to name specific names now, obviously, but
Yeah, yeah, definitely. So one of my clients who I just finished working with, he's an executive in the e-commerce space.
like a CEO executive?
I would say like a supply chain executive, so not quite CEO, but
Mm.
doing well at the company, going up. And
Why did he
so,
come to you?
yeah.
He's like, I'm a mid-level executive at a boring e-commerce company. I really want to up my personal brand. Like what did he say to you?
Yeah, well, it's so interesting because for him, and actually why a lot of my clients have come to me so far, is really to help them with their style. But they don't necessarily understand that it's important to have that personal brand first so that their style can communicate that. So for him, he really had this closet full of clothes and he didn't really know how to put any of them together. He didn't know what kind of colors went with what. And then he didn't really know how to dress for his environment. So his environment is very startup y. So he wanted to be able to wear something that he could be taken seriously in, but not look too stuffy
Mhm.
for that environment.
And so what were his 3 words?
So his three words were refined, elevated, and then revolutionary impact.
Okay, and was he a little older than the average employee in his firm?
I would say probably like mid-range. So for an executive level, those people are kind of like upper 30s, early 40s. For him, he's in his early 30s.
So, okay, so what was again, revolutionary,
Elevated.
elevated?
So
Elevated, what does that
it's
mean?
refined, elevated, and then revolutionary
What does
impact. Kind of
refined
cheat
mean?
on the last one because it's like a phrase. So elevated means kind of above the basic experience. So let me tell you how we got there. So with my clients, the core way that I help them to figure out what their personal brand is through doing a vision board. So vision boards are very simple in the way that you're kind of like pulling out images that kind of reflect where you want to go in life and then who you are. But they're also really impactful because you're putting all of that on paper. And it's when I hear the stories of why people have chosen those certain images is when the real magic happens and I can kind of understand the themes behind their stories.
How do you make a vision board?
Yeah, so, I give people a big pile of magazines, and it ranges from, National Geographic, like, focused on travel, fashion magazines, business magazines. I pulled out one that was focused on bourbon. So it just really ranges the gamut of all of these different interests people can have because people are multifaceted at the end of the day. So how we got to Elevated was that he pulled out a picture of a private jet. And so I'm thinking, okay, so this is someone who, wants to do very well in life. He wants to make a lot of money. That's very important to him. But it was interesting. It was actually the phrase below the private jet on that image, which said an elevated experience. So he doesn't want to be perceived as someone who's basic. And that's kind of what his wardrobe was communicating. He wants to be someone who's seen as that step above, who's going to help people and himself get further in life.
Okay, so that was elevated. What was the, next refined.
Yes.
How did you get to the word refined with him?
Yeah, so the word refined, he was pulling out images of actually bourbon,
Mm,
a picture of George Clooney,
mm.
who was holding like a cocktail in his hand, some pictures of other images with men who were in suits.
So from these first couple of images you described, you didn't come up with words like, materialistic and alcoholic?
So on the surface, you might
Uh,
look at that if I hadn't have actually spoken to him about what those images meant to him.
uh-huh,
But when he was speaking to me about why he chose them, that's how we got,
okay.
just from the picture to the actual what it represented.
And then revolutionary, what did he pick?
Yeah. So for him, he chose pictures of people just kind of out in the world helping others in these spirits of like servitude. And so the revolutionary impact, he doesn't just want to go to work every day and do his job. He wants to have a broader impact on the world in a way that helps people.
Okay, so then you go into his closet, he's
Mhm.
got just sort of basic whatever. What's basic?
Yeah. So basic are just like, boring pairs of pants. I mean, everyone needs certain pairs of pants that are like khaki and navy, those kinds of basic colors.
I don't have any of those.
Oh. Right,
I
but
have 4 pairs of black pants, and that's it.
4 pairs of black pants.
Yes.
Okay. Well, that speaks, I mean, you have a great brand, that speaks to who you are.
I'm not sure if I
Um
have a great brand, but and I'm not sure if I match my style to my brand, but we'll see. We'll get to that later.
Well, I can work with you as well if you like. But for him, he had those colors. He didn't have a lot of other color in his closet. The way that the clothes fit him, I mean, fit is absolutely crucial if you want to communicate something that's refined, something that has impact and elevated. So his pants were very baggy. They didn't really speak to his silhouette. His clothes didn't fit very
What do you mean
well.
they didn't speak to his silhouette?
Yeah, so they didn't follow the contour of his body. So, for example, a blazer with the lines that are on top are supposed to kind of meet your shoulders. They're supposed to come tailored to your body, not look too baggy or too tight or be too high up on your waist. And so for him, the blazers that he had were very, very baggy. So he kind of looked like I would say a younger person in an older person's clothes,
Uh,
like playing dress up versus really owning his brand.
so did you have him, like, tailor a suit or tailor an outfit?
Yeah, well, I went to a few different places, and luckily the clothes actually fit him quite well, but I'm a huge believer in tailoring. And so he has a shape that's called an ectomorph, which is pretty kind of slender, like straight up and down, not super muscular, very much in shape still. So that's kind of like the easiest shape to fit in
Until
terms of
that
not
last
getting
sentence, I was gonna say
tailoring.
I was an
Yeah.
ectomorph, but I'm not very much in shape, but go ahead, sorry.
Okay, but kind of, just thin. And so that's probably the easiest shape to fit where you
Mhm,
don't need tailoring. Whereas if you see someone like The Rock, I mean, he gets all of his clothes tailored. I think that's called like a mesomorph. So his body is very kind of big on the top, very powerful and muscular, and then kind of like tailored and
mm,
tapered down. So for him, he has a very special body shape. So I'm sure all of his clothes get tailored.
hmm. And so s okay, so what happened to him once you tailor the clothes, do you tailor anything else? I mean, do you modify anything else in his style?
Yeah, so I kind of have this inventory that I go through because one of his issues were that he didn't know how to put his clothes together on a daily basis. So I wanted him to have a mix of essentials as well as things that could represent that next step to really communicate his brand. So I have a list of items. Every male's closet should have at least 5 pairs of very tailored looking pants that fit you in neutral colors as well as in colors. Ones I chose for him were like an eggplant, an olive. So ones that are kind of easy to play with, but also communicate a little bit of personality. I did get him a pair of flowered pants. They had like florals all over them. And I think that was stepping a little bit too much out of his zone, but I wanted to get to that revolutionary impact place. So he didn't end up keeping that pair, but it was just kind of giving him the possibility of
Mm,
like how far we could take this. But I want to make sure that he was comfortable. Every closet should definitely have a pair of dark brown Oxfords, black Oxfords, should have certain accessories like socks that have that pop of color, maybe lapel pins that you can play with to get you to that next level. So I kind of take an inventory of what the closet has. I had him try on all of his clothes because some of them, even if they're the right clothes, they don't necessarily fit. So they're not quite getting there. So then I have that checklist. We try on all the clothes. So then I know my next step is to go shopping for him, see what he needs to get, and then bring those clothes back to him and show him all the kind of different styles and ways he can mix and match them to get to where he wants to go.
and what about anything other than clothes? Like, what about, like,
Yeah.
gear or, like, should some personal brands have an iPhone and some have an Android? What kinda glasses they should they have? Do
Yeah.
you get into all those decisions?
Yeah, well, he's a watch guy,
Mhm.
so he loves watches. I mean, watches are a great accessory to play with. So he wears his Apple Watch every day. but that communicates to his brand. If he had a more kind of maximalist type of brand, I would say, okay, we need to get you like a different watch band or something in some sort of print that takes you to that more maximalist type of positioning. So it can be that, an iPhone or an Android. I don't quite get to that level with people.
Mhm.
I think it's whatever they're most comfortable with in that zone. It's more within accessories. But then once they have those 3 words, they can use that as like a voice for themselves in terms of like their social media, different content that they post. They can write a biography for themselves. It kind of explains, their background, like inserting those 3 words in, and if there are different jobs and things like that that they want to apply for, they can start with that bio, which injects that personality and then tie it to the job description.
Okay, so that's what happened to him after he made these changes?
Mhm.
Did he noticeably change?
He did. It
Mm.
was so funny. Even as he was trying on the clothes, you just saw him standing taller. Like his stride was different. He was really owning the confidence that he was manifesting through the clothes and actually feeling that genuinely. And so that's really the biggest reward for people because I check in with my clients, to see how they're doing, what changes they're witnessing, and for all of them, it's an increased level of confidence.
And have you is it too early to tell, like, what's been the effects on his career?
I think it's a little bit early to tell for
Mhm.
him, but, I'll definitely keep in touch with him on that as well, and, one of my past clients, her 3 words were fierce, dynamic, and playful, and so for her, she if you just kind of looked at her and didn't really know her, you would think she was, like, this very quiet person, just kind of blended into the background, but she had all of this bubbling up inside of her that we wanted to communicate. So, once we had those 3 words for her, I would actually see her doing presentations. She would send me, recordings and clips and kind of fill me in, and I could see just kind of a before and after of how she was giving those presentations before, and then afterward, the change and kind of the command that she got,
What did you
from our
change in the clothing?
process. Yeah, so, she was wearing I think people are afraid of color.
Mhm.
I get that a lot from people.
Maybe in New York City.
Maybe, yeah, maybe in New York City, but even in New York City, that can
Mhm.
benefit you, right? So, for her, she was wearing, again, kind of a lot of clothes that were left over from like high school because her shape hadn't changed very much. Lots of kind of like black pants that had seen, several lights of day and just needed to be replaced by something more fit and tailored. And then lots of clothing in, colors like black, white, khaki. Again, just staying within that neutral space.
Dresses?
Not a lot of dresses, not a lot of dresses. But then in the space that we took her in, I chose this really great skirt for her that was pleated and it had colors, of course, like black and white, because she was safe with those, but also introduced bold reds, bold greens, bold yellows that she could pair with just like a black top. And so that for her communicated that dynamism. So this is someone who is not afraid of color, is not afraid of change, that fierceness, which means she can go into a room with that color, command attention, but also still that playfulness, like with the pleats. So
Mhm.
it's really through these details, fits, colors that you get to those things.
Do you ever think that like, I think, like, for men, for instance, like, there's men who wear, like, a bow tie or they have really funky glasses.
Yeah.
I feel like that's, like, an affectation to some extent, like, it's
Mhm.
I don't believe it. It feels fake to me, like, they're trying to be something they're trying to be noticed for something they aren't. S
Yeah. Well, it might just be because they're choosing something that somebody told them to do, but doesn't actually reflect who they are as a person.
Mm,
So that's why that inward reflective work is so important because, yes, people will sniff out if you're not being authentic in 5 minutes. It really has to come from within.
mm. And, how did you get into this? Like, what were
Yeah.
you doing? You were working you mentioned before you were working at Colgate Palmolive.
Yeah.
What were you were a brand manager. What brand were you managing?
So I was working on Irish Spring. I was also managing Optic White and then Palmolive.
Are
But
these
I would
all like,
say,
what's Optic White? Like
yeah, it's toothpaste.
mhm.
Mhm.
I don't brush my teeth, so I don't know about these things. And what's the, what was the other one? The first one you said?
So Irish Spring,
What's that?
Palmolive. So Irish Spring is bar soap and body wash. So I
Okay.
was on the body wash side.
Mhm.
And then Palmolive, like dish liquid.
And, were you like all of a sudden one day, "I'm gonna quit and help people dress for their
Well,
personal brands?
my story has not gone in a straight line, but it all of the dots connect. So
Really?
it really starts when I was little. When I was really young, I remember playing dress up in my mom's like cocktail dresses and her high heels, which totally didn't fit my feet at all. I would make shoes out of construction paper because I just wanted to be creative in that way. But when I went outside to try to walk in them, they were very uncomfortable. But that part of me just always loved fashion. I would always have a copy of like Vogue magazine in my hand. So when I went to college, I thought I wanted to pursue fashion design because I thought that that was kind of the only route within fashion that you could do as a career. And I wasn't very good at it. I wasn't really good at making the patterns, for the clothing, the sewing and stuff. I really didn't enjoy kind of like the bones of the actual fashion design. I didn't enjoy at all, and
Mm.
I couldn't really get into it, nor was I very talented at it. I was better at actually, picking out clothes and putting them together, but I didn't know that that was actually a career path that I could do. So
Although there are, like, professional shoppers at high-end clothing stores and stuff.
right, that's true, but I don't know, I always just kind of saw that as, like, you're working for Barney's or
Mhm.
Bloomingdale's, not so much on the individual level, you're
Mm.
working for
Right.
somebody else, you're just like the medium, the intermediary. So, I decided to pursue some other creative passions. I always had a love of the written word, so I decided to work in book publishing, at Penguin Random House. And so there, it was during the time when ebooks were exploding. It makes me
What years
sound
was it was this?
yeah, this was, in 2008, like 2009,
Who'd you
2010.
which imprint when in Penguin did you work for?
Well, at the time, they hadn't combined yet, so the Speakers Bureau was only within Knopf, but then years later, they decided to combine, so now I just call it Penguin Random House, but at the time, it was Random House because the bureau was going from Knopf to represent all authors from all of the different
Hmm.
houses. So I worked as an assistant for the bureau, and so I would assist other lecture agents in booking authors at speaking engagements at conferences, corporations. But I was also responsible for putting together the brand identity for this new unified speakers bureau that wasn't just within Knopf. So that was the first time where I got a taste of the branding part. I'm like, this is really fun. Like I'm putting together a story for something that's new. And then after that, I worked in the nonprofit field for a little while, also in the area of literacy and reading. And I was just kind of thinking about, okay, what is it that I want to do next? Like, I love marketing, I love like the branding piece, but I felt like I got the storytelling side of it. But I wanted to get kind of the more like quantitative side. I didn't do a lot of quant stuff in my jobs, and quant stuff is important, right? So I got my MBA at NYU Stern. And then after I graduated, that's where I went to Colgate and I worked on all these different brands. And I would say my last year is where I really started being able to, because a lot of the times you're caretakers for these brands that have been around for like a really long time. And then when I worked in innovation, I was able to actually develop the personalities for new products that we were
Hmm.
going to launch, really understanding, okay, what is it that makes this unique? What is it that's going to make this appealing to someone? Like, why is this relevant to people? And asking those questions, again, developing the personality. And then just on the side, I've been kind of like styling my friends for events. I styled my mom a lot of the time, and people would just come to me saying, okay, can I send you a picture? Does this look good with this? Does this look good with that? And then an opportunity came to my mind, and I said, "You know what? Like, branding is all about somebody's story. It's all about, communicating that, what makes them unique." And then the styling part is how they communicate that to the world. Yes, there's so many ways to communicate your brand, but your style is one of the first things that people see about you, before you even say a word. So I had the idea to kind of marry these 2 things together. So my last couple of years at Colgate, I was just, kind of putting the bones together, doing work with some test clients of mine to see if the idea actually had legs, and it did. And so,
Meaning you would
yeah.
approach people and say, "Hey, I could work with your personal brand is not quite fitting your style. I can work with you and you'll have more success as a result," and people were responsive to that?
Really? Yes, yes. Or just taking them through the entire process, saying, I have this idea, and I just chose a couple of my friends because, they were supportive, but also people who I didn't necessarily know as well, so they just wouldn't be blowing smoke. But they did actually see those results of feeling more confidence when they would go out. And again, that's what this is all about: is being more confident in yourself and how you express that to
And so the
others.
process is, okay, find your 3 words,
Hmm.
slash, do the vision board, kind of talk with you to kind of tease out the 3 words,
Hmm.
look at your current style, clothes, whatever, and then try to figure out things that match those words a little better. Like, where are you not matching those words? Where are you? And, and the end result is when your style matches your personal brand, you'll have confidence and presumably more success and so on.
Exactly.
And,
Exactly.
I like it. Maybe I should figure it out. I don't really have any style or personal brand, so at some point, I should probably get the 2 in sync and figure them out.
Well, you have a personal brand. Everyone has a personal brand. It just might not be the one that you're going after. But
That
again,
could
you've
very much
you've
fade.
done well. So
But, so the company's Brand, Style, and Bloom by Elizabeth Danielle and Elizabeth Lewis. Thank you so much for coming on the podcast.
thank you. My
Thank you.
pleasure.